So welcome to the Node API team meeting for the July 7th, 2023. We'll follow our standard approach of looking at the issues that were tagged for Milestone 11. Any news or anything that people want to share to start? Okay, if not, I am going to share my screen. Here we go. And let us go to issues. Milestones 11. Okay, so I think Kevin, you were gonna, I don't know if you've had a chance yet, but you were gonna take a quick look at some of those, I think.
Yes, I put some recommendations there in the comments.
Okay.
So there was branch protection, and then there's some unused branches that can be deleted. I don't know if we have it, but there's an option to make code reviews mandatory. That could be something that we can investigate. And then fuzzing, which that would be a whole ordeal with getting that included.
Right, okay. That's an interesting one in that, like, you know, the security working group is, maybe we could ask for help from them to say like, hey, is there anybody who's interested in fuzzing, and what did we do for Node Core on that one? Are you thinking like, is it hard to turn on, or more just that like if it turns on?
Well, if you open that link, node.js example.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
So there's this open source project where you basically configure your individual projects in here. And if you open this fuzz URL CC,
Yep.
this is how they perform some sort of fuzzing test. I'm not exactly sure
Right, okay.
Yeah, but it's like you have to create a Docker file to build an image that has your tests in it that you want to run. But this appears to be the only fuzzing test that we have for Node Core.
Okay, which is doesn't look like a lot.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So it's,
yeah, and then the Docker file like checks out the code, and then the build script builds everything, and then it runs with the fuzzer somehow.
okay. So that's one where it sounds like it'd be enough work that asking for some help could make some sense on that one.
I guess first we have to decide if it makes sense to add it to the project.
I think fuzzing, I think is meant to like find problems through some sort of more random testing versus like specific unit tests.
Right.
So if it was if it was no work, I'd be like, well, why wouldn't we turn it on, right?
There.
So that's kind of where I'm like, but I'm like you, I don't really understand, haven't looked at it. I know people have like talked about fuzzing for Node Core before, and it's always been like nobody's actually followed through. There does seem to be more of a focus though these days on supply chain security, and there's some people who are, so the security act working group's much more active. We might get a volunteer there to say like, hey, we could say, hey, you know, this team would be happy to turn it on if you want a test bed that's not Node Core to try and add some fuzzing tests.
Gotcha.
And even the foundation has some, like they got a big grant from the OSTF, which is the Open Source Technology Initiative, to help improve security at different projects. So there might be, you know, some way to ask for some help through there and say like, hey, if you want to show how you can turn on fuzzing for a project in Node, here's an example, right?
Right. Okay.
So that's kind of where I would like, if somebody's got an interest, that'd be great. But otherwise, from your look and my past experience, I'd expect it's like it's a bunch of work for somebody to take on, right? So
Yeah.
we might not just decide to do it as our current team, but if we could ask for, if somebody else was volunteering to help us, then it might make sense.
Right. We can do everything else first and then take
Yeah.
another look at it to see if
Okay.
it's something we want to take. Yeah, so that was it for
Okay.
Node add-on API, branch
Yep.
protection, code review fuzzing. And then in addition to that, on examples, we need a license file, as well as the GitHub Action CI. They have tokens that are not read-only. So that's something that's easily changeable. And then do we want to add that code QL scanning, similar that we have a Node add-on API? Do we want to do that as well?
Yeah. What kind of things is it? It just gives you a report when you check in new code, right?
Yes. I'm not exactly sure what everything it's reporting on. It's just like a static code analysis.
I don't think that hurts. That like it could give us some more like, hey, we're
Mhm.
putting in a test and it's got some problems in it.
Right. One thing I think we would want to turn off is the dependabot, because since we're like doing examples, I don't think we would want our examples to always be updated. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because like sometimes maybe we're showing examples of how to do old stuff. I don't know. But to me, it seems odd for example code to be continuously updated for package versions.
What packages are we installing anyway?
I
I
think
guess it's
it does have like the examples require the Node add-on API package, as
right.
well as I think bindings is a common one that
Yep.
we have as well.
Semver, Husky. Eh,
I guess it may be important if, for example, somebody finds some security issues and dependable that can force us to update it.
yeah.
It's mostly
Okay.
about security, I guess. Like, I know that in some other open source projects I work on, it's kind of important issue.
I'd be
Well,
tempted to turn it on and see if it causes us problems.
another thing on the examples repo is for the CI. All it does is it installs each example. So it compiles. It doesn't actually run anything.
Right.
I don't know if that would be problematic also. Like maybe we get a package update or something and it compiles fine, but it doesn't run fine. I don't know what the odds of that are, considering that, we only really use those two packages. So maybe, yeah, maybe let's just turn it on and see what happens.
Yeah, and if we get reports of it being broken or whatever, we can back out but it seems like the license file missing, that's definitely a gap, and that we should have the license file. And we also should have I guess we're missing sort of baseline files that we ask for all repos to have.
Like contributing and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like contributing, code of conduct, all those things. There's about 3 or 4.
Is there some sort of guide for that, or do we just sort of copy and edit from other
That is a good
repositories?
question. I usually look in other repos and say, what do we need? However,
Right.
we should actually have, like, I'm looking to see node, so node admin, not just admin. And we have GitHub org management. So yeah, that should be explicitly called out, but I don't think it is. It's a good point. Like
Right.
I found this in our GitHub org management policy. I'll paste it into the chat, but it doesn't say what should be there. I think we've just done that informally, but that is a key thing that I think this one we inherited, like, so it might not have solved this one, but we should still have a list of requirements, like before it's landed, it should have this, and this file. So I'll try and remember to add that in, because I think that that makes a lot of sense. I'm just giving myself a week, no, a reminder of that.
And regarding the code QL scanning, I believe you're the one who initiated it for Node add-on API, and then I just fixed the PR. Could we do some, because I don't know what you had to do to start that. Would you want to do that again?
So yeah, I could. Like, what I did was, there's this tool that will, like, basically you point it at a repo and it creates a PR for you. So I can figure that out again and do it, or if you want, you could do it too. It's, where was
Because I don't know if I'll have to have certain permissions or something for it, you know?
You need to maybe be a collaborator on the repo. Anyway, I'll do that.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
a couple of clicks of a button, so I'm happy to do that. So let me,
Yeah, if you can
add
do
that to
that, and then
mine.
I'll update the PR to make everything merge correctly or pass.
Sounds good. So I'm add PR to examples repo for security for code. Okay. Yeah, and it may give us some other recommendations too, like it did for the others, but
Right. Then the other recommendations are basically just configuring of the repo,
right.
like the branch protection and everything like that. But I think
Yeah,
an add-on of the repo needs to do that.
right, okay. The branch protection, so that I can't think of any reason why we wouldn't do that, right?
The
Like, we don't force push to that branch, I don't think, regularly, so.
right. The only reason that I saw was when we were doing the releases and Nick was pushing directly to main the version changes, which I pointed out. And I think now we have a better way to do
Right.
that moving forward.
Okay.
But I don't think there's anything else that would ever be pushed directly to main.
But branch protection, okay, so, so that basically says you can't push directly to main anymore. It always has to PR in, is that?
I believe so, yes.
Because
I
I
don't
probably
know,
still,
I don't know how the merge process is. Like sometimes when you land stuff, do you ever just like close the PR, but then somehow merge it and then push it to main?
I often follow the node collaborator. Like, node has a particular way of doing it, which is, yeah, like you land it on main, you adjust the metadata, and then you push it to main. So I tend to do that. I don't know, just because that's what I'm used to on node. Whether we need to whether that makes sense. Like, I thought it made sense in some sense for me, in that, like, it kept me in the habit of what you do for node. So, but I don't always do that. Sometimes, like, if it's a doc, so typically when I do that is, like, I pull it, I do all that stuff, I run, there's a little tool to say, hey, like, is the titles the right lengths and all that kind of stuff. And then I run the tests, and if the test passed, then I push it, right? But we're running all the tests in the CI and all that. And so it might make more sense for me to just stop doing that and to just
Well, you could just see if we have problems.
yeah. So maybe I'll turn it on
Yeah.
and see if it, yeah. Okay. The code review is mandatory. That one, I wonder how you bypass that if you Like what happens if you do want to push something without a code review? Like, you're doing a release. We don't really need a code review for some things like that.
I think you would still need to get approval. There's an option for admins to bypass it, but
Right.
their recommendation is even for admins to have required review.
So when you did, you did the last release, would that have slowed you down needing, like, was there something that, you would have needed a quick turnaround on a,
No, not really.
okay. So in that case, maybe we should turn it on and we can decide to revert if there's an issue there too.
Yeah, and it also adds another eye because sometimes, because you're editing multiple things, you're also
Right.
like README for the latest version and things like that. So it's good to have that second eye, I
Okay.
would say.
Okay. So it sounds like, okay, but all those things need an admin to go in and do them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just trying to see who is the admins for settings. Team member role. Okay, well, that's showing me the predefined roles, but I want to know who's in them. Okay, now I have to log in. No, I didn't. Sorry, still 2FA is, where did that show up? Oh, there we go. I see. So like our Node API team is all right. I guess we have no admin. I just have access because I'm an org owner of the whole node thing. I might as well just go in and change those.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll take too long.
Okay.
Okay, well, thanks for reviewing that, and that all sounds good, and we can sort of go from there. I'll turn on, like, yeah, I'll find that place. It was like somewhere, it was a company who's got a tool that like will help you reach the scorecard thing. So that's where they generated the PR for us.
Gotcha. All right.
That's great. Okay, well, yeah, thanks for doing all that. We talked about no new news. I don't think there's an update on the C language bindings. We don't have an update on the coverage, I don't think.
I worked a little
Right, go
bit
ahead.
on the coverage, actually.
Okay, go for
If
it.
you can go to Node add-on API pulls.
Yep.
And under Jack's work in progress one, the last
Right.
one there.
Yep.
I started working on looking at how Node Core also uploads their coverage reports.
Yep.
And sort of extending on what Jack did, I made a CI job on my fork that would run the Gcov and upload it. And if you click on in my comments there.
Okay, sure. Here?
Yeah, you can click on File Explorer there.
Okay. Yeah.
And then this will show the two files with their coverage percentages there.
Okay. It's interesting that I guess the .h is 100%.
So I did two different runs, one with optimizations turned off, which is
Right.
this one.
Okay.
And then one with optimizations on, I think 03 or something.
Yeah.
And they have different coverage percents, so I don't
Okay.
know. But yeah, the inline is around 60. I think the other one was like 65 or so.
Okay.
But also I'm not exactly sure if it is or like how accurate it is, because I found some stuff that we have tests for, but it was listed as untested.
So it'd be interesting to look at a specific one and like convince ourselves that it really is covering.
Right. So if you go back to my comment, then
Yeah. Okay.
um
Let me find. Okay. Right. Sorry. I'm just gonna leave that window open and go back to.
so in the comment, I guess the second to last one up here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it says if you click the is not covered,
Right.
that is the line that says it's not covered. Takes a while to load because it's
Yep.
a huge file. This one here, this thread safe new with environment, callback, resource name string, max queue, and thread count. But now if you go back to my comment, there's a link to a test that tests that specific one.
Right.
So
Okay. So thread safe function new, and then I should have kept the window.
and then in the second, yep, we have a test there. Which is that
Interesting.
one. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I find that odd.
Yeah, this is template, right? Like, and wonder if
Yes,
we
it's
see an issue that
templated.
if for some specializations covered, but some specializations not.
That's what I was wondering too, is like, is it that we've covered one? Because type name, resource string, type name, context type. Are there different ones of those?
Yeah, the thread safe function new, there's like 5 or 6 different overloads.
Right. So is it that this is saying like, have we only tested one of them?
Well, our tests have basically all of them. So that's why it's a little concerning as to why. But like was mentioned that maybe it has something to do with the templating. I don't know.
Right. So if we look at the tests, so we've got this, but there's multiple new tests.
Yeah, we have a bunch of thread safe function tests in this folder. And this folder
Okay.
has various signatures being used for thread safe function new.
Because yeah, that would be the only reason that I could think of. So this shows, so this one, so it's basically. Because it says like, hey, this one's covered. It's interesting, this one is covered, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically complaining about one specific, so it's complaining about one where you provide just a resource string and not the context.
No context. Yeah.
But
That's the
then
difference
this
between.
one, sorry, this one was supposed to be the specific where,
Yeah, that one is the one that says it's not being tested.
so that one doesn't have so that's got the context, but not the,
That has no context. It's that one there where it has environment, callback, the resource string, and
right,
then the integers.
yeah, 1, 2, 3, 5.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's definitely strange.
Right. And it's like if that's what we were using to test, to like say which methods were covered, you know, like if we were using the coverage report to say which methods are
Yeah.
covered, it's just saying this one isn't covered at all, which would be odd.
Yeah, I'm just now looking. Sorry. Is there some chance we don't run this?
It would probably be in the JS file of the same name.
So it should be rough. Okay, right. So let's go back here.
And maybe just change the .cc to .js.
Yeah, okay. So that should be it right there. And then exec.
Yeah, it has to start in a new process because
Right.
it's testing ref and unrefs.
Right.
Uh,
So maybe that's part of the problem, right? Like maybe it's that if we start a new process, it like though that new process needs to be started such that it will generate coverage info as well.
Well, you don't run the process specially. You compile it and
Right,
link
you
it.
compile, okay.
Because you just add that coverage flag
Yeah.
to the compilation. So I think anything that's running it that loads your binary would end up creating coverage reports. I
Okay,
think.
so it's not a runtime, yeah, it's just a compile time thing.
Right.
And all of the, do we generate multiple binaries?
Yes, there's like the exception, no exception, swallow exception, custom namespace. I think there's like 5 in total.
Okay, and all those are compiled with the, to generate the coverage as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is this coverage report maybe bound to specific process ID, and there's maybe additional options, so we can need to kind of combine them somehow, like?
I can look if that's the case. Because basically every object file that gets compiled, it also, when you run it at runtime, it creates 2 additional files that correspond to the runtime execution paths. So I don't know what happens, like if it's ran a second time because it's a second process, if it gets overwritten or anything like that. I can kind of I can look into that as well, because I don't really know anything else.
Because this uses the code cover, like the Linux code cover, whatever it is.
Gcov, yes,
Gcov,
which
yeah.
is the same one that Node Core uses.
Yeah.
And
So
this is the same service, this CodeCov IO.
just like that's been around long enough that my first guess is it's something it's something in terms of how we've set it up or running it versus it just missing things.
Yeah. You
That
know,
obviously, right?
I can do a test commit by throwing like a console out, you
Right.
know, in there, and then running it and then seeing if I see it on the console, and then if it gets reported as,
Yeah.
I'll do that as well. Just a quick test.
Yeah. Could be something like that. Or like, Vladimir was suggesting, like, if you've got multiple processes running, how do you make sure that they don't overwrite each
Mhm.
other, and or maybe you have to collect different files together to, I don't know what. But,
Right.
it could be missing things, but my first guess is that's a lower likelihood than something else going on.
Right. Okay.
I also see
Um,
like on Stack Overflow, it seems like gcarve has common issue that you have some files the same name, like maybe test files the same name, multiple folders. By default, they can also override each other. So there are some kind of options how we can force a gcarve to use the full path to the file, differentiate them.
Do we have some test names that are the same?
But
Well, I think it's the file names are based off of the object names that get compiled. And if you're running it multiple times, I could see that being overwritten. With
Or we
this text
run
that has
different,
to start node as a subprocess or whatever.
right? And we do run them in different modes
Right.
multiple times.
So that
Yeah.
could be the thing too.
Okay.
I'll look into that as well.
Okay, well,
Okay,
thanks
yeah,
for
that's
helping to move
it
that
I have.
forward.
Mhm.
Okay. So let's dive into the stale issues. Just see if there's anything to chat about. This one, I guess, still working away on.
yeah, I did some progress here, like update documentation stuff. I think I'm getting very close for you guys to look at it. Just I guess a couple questions. So first of all, like I found that I think like whenever the garbage collector runs finalizers, our code can be potentially in some unstable state, right? Like for example, we can have some error condition, right? Like because garbage collector can potentially locate, can run our finalizer pass. Whenever it tries to locate additional memory and there is some limit hit, it can run it. So technically at this point, we may have kind of a pending JavaScript exception, or maybe some other errors. My current approach is that if I experience issues like this, if I see in current state we have any kind of pending errors or something, so instead of running finalizers immediately, I'm scheduling them to be run as a kind of set immediate. I'm scheduling to be run in next.
So that's even if they're pure finalizers?
Right. So yeah, I guess that's my question. Like, is it kind of a reasonable approach? What do you think? Or
Right, and the reason they might run then is because I guess, like, if they're a pure finalizer, why does that matter? That there's like a pending JavaScript exception, or because they shouldn't be doing anything JavaScript related. That's like your pure one should just be doing C-level code. So whatever's happening at the JavaScript side shouldn't matter.
the scenario that I have in mind, like imagine that we have an add-on, right? And usually, sometimes this add-on may need to access some internal state, and at least we need to be able to access this get instance data, for example. Get instance data should not affect any GC stuff, and we should be allowed to call get instance data. But get instance data returns node API status as a result. And also, for example, if in our status kind of global, right? Like if we call function, it may set it to good status. But imagine we in context, it's already known to be bad status, right? So technically,
So it says, hey, there's a pending exception and we just don't. I guess the question is, should get, like, so the get constant data, should that one actually do that? Is like, if you can run it, even if there's a JavaScript exception, a pending exception, should it complain?
Yeah, like if we're running pure finalizer should be kind of free of this context, right? Like, so.
But it's more like that. It's more like that method. If that method, if you can call that method, even if there's a pending exception, we should possibly not. Like, I guess the thing is it doesn't give you the answer if there's a pending exception. Or does it give you the answer and tell you there's a pending exception?
Sorry, I'm probably not as well.
So, like, you want to get the context, right? Because you want to get your context, do some cleanup.
Right.
You're making the call, and I think what I understood is you said the call will tell you there's a pending exception, right?
Oh yeah, like we pretty much I'm checking two different conditions. Like, first of all, if we have any pending errors, like or we have our current status says that we are in error. Like, yeah, we definitely we inside of a node environment. We can check all these different conditions. So the question, like, what should we do? Like, I think we have two different strategies. One of them, just simply preserve all these different kind of error condition and kind of zero it out, and while we're running finalizers, and restore them back.
Right.
The other thing, like we don't touch them with error conditions. If we see them, then we schedule finalizers to be run asynchronously.
Yeah, I would. Sorry, go ahead.
I think, why can't, I mean, we should just, what happens now if say it's a pure finalizer, they call get instance data, and for some reason it returns like there's an exception already. Like, what happens if we just let it run is what I'm trying to figure out.
We will not be able to run some of them because we may check like if there are pending errors before we do any code, and it will effectively may fail. So we need to kind of we must run these pure finalizers in a clean context. The only question, like how to achieve it, like we can preserve, we can actually, for example, preserve all this bad state, clean it up, run pure finalizers, and restore bad state. Another problem we can have, like if we see bad state, we just do it asynchronously.
But like, I'm wondering if for that particular method, like the get context, it in particular, like I know, like, so it sounds like today, if there's a pending JavaScript exception, it'll just say, sorry, I'm not going to do that. I'm telling you there's a pending exception, right? Like, my basic question is, like, does that make sense? Like, maybe we've got that particular method wrong, and that method should actually say, well, I don't care if there's pending exceptions. I don't care. Like, I don't care if there's a pending exception because it doesn't affect this call.
Okay.
And so, like, for that one, we would maybe change that one to just say, like, don't check the pending exception because we know that doesn't affect whether this function will work or not.
Okay.
And that, because like, and so that's where I'm like, did we just make a mistake with that one in terms of like, yeah, it should be able to run even if there's a pending exception, and that's the fix versus anything bigger than that.
I'm not 100% sure that get instance data does it right now. Just it's more like theoretical at this point.
Yeah,
right. So I would check that one and see if it works, because I think like some of them we should only, the right answer is we should be only checking for things that matter and not preventing some methods from running, even if there's a pending JavaScript exception, right? And I think we've done that, but we could have gotten it wrong, or maybe I'm imagining remembering that we did that. But I think our checks are different for some of the methods.
Okay. Yeah. So technically, there are two things. Like one of them, pending exception, like a JavaScript exception,
Yep.
and what you just said, it makes perfect sense. And second one, if we talk about some internal Node API errors, like because if we find some error, like for example, somebody passed us null, right? Like where we expect a non-null value. What we typically do, we report in, for example, generic error, but we also actually setting the state, right? Like we set in the state, like saying, oh, we have some kind of error state. So the question, like, what to
That
do?
may get overwritten though if you make another call.
Right. So, but this kind of pure finalizer can be called effectively at any moment. Maybe I'm
Okay, so you're saying the pure finalizer. Well, that could be a different thing. Like if the pure finalizer can be called in the middle of some code.
I guess we should never have this situation, right? Because technically calling, okay, kind of garbage collector finalizer can be called only in response if we call it in JavaScript touching function, right? And we only should call it if we're in a good state. Is
Right.
correct?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be weird in my mind for the garbage collector to run after like an exception is thrown, maybe. I don't know. That would be weird.
But think about, like, if you talk about JavaScript exceptions, the way it does, like we, for example, V8 engine says like I have exception. So what we typically do, say like, oh, let us give us this exception, and you don't have exception anymore. So V8 does not know about exceptions anymore.
Right.
We know about it.
It's definitely a good point. Like if those can run in the middle of a sequence of calls, you don't want it to be like the being affected by the previous state isn't more the concern. It's maybe the erasing the existing state would be the concern, right?
Right. Yes.
Right. So I could see that, like, we don't want those pure finalizers to be able to affect the existing state in any way.
Right.
So in that context, like maybe your suggestion of like, I don't know how, I haven't looked at the code in long enough that I don't know how you make this happen, but like, it's like, hey, it gets its own state effectively, right? Because it's like another thread of execution almost.
Right. Yeah, what's like previously I was preserving the state and then restoring it. Like in current code, I'm kind of doing it asynchronously, but with what I want to discuss with you folks, like if what would you consider better strategy? Because I found myself switching between these two.
Yeah, I think the preserve and restore makes sense to me, just from the, like, if I say I get the state and that succeeds, but there's already something that says like your last call failed. So somebody makes a call, then if this can run in and it fails, and then something runs in the middle, the finalizer runs in the middle and makes a successful call, and it overwrites that state, and then somebody says, well, get me the last error, and it gets, well, there was no last error. That seems wrong, right? Because they did make a call and there is an error, and they should be able to get that error.
Hmm.
Yeah, the only question, like, is it it's even possible to have error state?
Right? Is it? Yeah.
It's so we actually, it can be first strategy. If we find that we're in error states and pure finalizer called, we can actually crash, right? And then we kind of if we have a serious situation, we can address it in the future. But I don't know how disastrous it can be in practice. Like if somebody runs node.js in production and if ever find this situation.
Right. Yeah. You're saying the JavaScript will only run when we've made a call that, like, which could trigger JavaScript, right?
Right.
At which point the return from that will already set the state again. So it's going to potentially set the pending error and potentially set the return code. So if that's the case, then there's, even if the state was changed, it'll be overwritten on the way out. Right. So it may not be possible, in which case, yeah, it would be back to if the methods we need to call complain, then maybe they're just wrong, because if there is a pending exception, then they shouldn't be. You shouldn't be calling them, like, if the pending exception affects them, they shouldn't be called in the pure finalizer anyway.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Because they're not just supposed to be calling JavaScript anyways.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I don't know if we
it's
answered your
almost as
question.
To me, it's almost as if whatever the pure finalizers do or whatever state they start in is almost irrelevant. Maybe. Because it's like, if you can't call into JavaScript anyways, like I don't know. I don't know. I don't really see it being a problem. Like, what would happen, for example, if your finalizer threw your peer finalizer through an STD exception? How would we handle that?
I guess we crash.
We would crash. Okay.
Um,
So I wonder, like, I guess if it's already in a bad state and you try to do something you're not supposed to, then maybe we would just crash. I don't know. Like, I don't think we should make it too complicated.
yeah, I agree. Like it's what
It sounds like just doing nothing may be okay.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm kind of at, just doing nothing.
And like, maybe we can, you can check one of those, like the calls you think we need to make. We can just check that those are doing the right thing. Like that they're not going to throw if there's a pending JavaScript exception. And I think based on your, the finalizers only run if we've let JavaScript run. Therefore, we're already in the middle of some call which will overwrite the return value. And yeah, and if there was a pending JavaScript exception, it might not let that happen. Anyway, yeah, sounds like hopefully nothing is needed, and maybe we'll see once there's a few more unit tests.
and also kind of another question, like, while I have all these basic tests right now, like for different scenarios, should I kind of create a much more thorough test? Like, for example, just effectively going through all node API functions and check, like, if I call in this function from pure finalizer, we have a crash. And if I'm calling something else, it does not crash. So effectively have a full set of node API functions to be tested against are they okay to be run from pure finalizer or not?
The causing a crash, that sounds like that test will take a little while to run, will it? Or I'm like, the more
But I
testing, the
found
better.
if it's successful, if we expect crash and it successfully crashes, on my machine one test was relatively fast.
Okay.
Then our expectation does not match. I see like it spend some time analyzing it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, no, if it's wrong, then hey, we should. I'm always for, like, if we can efficiently write and run the tests, then it's a good thing to have.
Okay.
And definitely the positive ones at a minimum would be good to say, like, we expect you to be able to call all of these. Can you? That would cover the exact discussion we just had, right? Like you could almost set something that causes a JavaScript exception to be pending, and then make sure that in finals you can call all those things, right?
Would we call it in our documentation, saying, like, for example, this specific node API functions is safe to be called from pure finalizers?
That would probably be good too. I'm not sure whether we say which ones. I'd have to look at our documentation, like get context. What does that one say?
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is the thread safe function calls. those specifically say those can be called from any thread. I don't know about other Node API functions.
Yeah,
Where is is it under?
can potentially pollute our documentation, right? We can say like most functions are not safe to call, except if we say it is safe to call, like and only it will probably like just a few which can be called.
Right, yeah, it should be a small set. Where?
I think we talk about it in the env data type.
Okay.
I think we say it's not meant to be stored. Maybe it's in the underlying core documentation.
I found this, which talks about get and set instance data, right? But yeah, this is, I guess, this one. You're right, maybe it's the no, okay. No.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't want to get into a place where we have to explicitly say,
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it would be helpful to know which ones you could call in the pure finalizer. It just seems like there may be a lot of that we'd have to explicitly check for and test. It may just be better to say something generic, like you cannot use any Node APIs that affect JavaScript.
Yeah, I guess the question is, how do you know? I think it'd be interesting to look at the set and say, like, maybe, this get and set, if we confirm that like those have nothing, those are totally safe, then maybe we would be willing to say like those two you can call, right? And maybe those are the only two we need to say that are callable there.
I put in the chat a link to its source for the get instance data.
Okay. I'm trying to reopen the chat now. There it is. Okay.
Yeah, because get instance data only goes to our internal data structure, like a ref base. Like we have this, we're not touching effectively anything V8 related. So
right,
assume it should be safe, right? And it's I think it's important for us that this specific function will be safe, because people want to free up some of our native resources. They need to have at least to have access to this entry point, if you like.
Right, that's the only place you can really store stuff and then get later, and yeah, so.
Okay. Well, we can easily find a list of all the methods and take a gander of which ones should be allowed or not.
Okay.
Once we get to the documentation point.
Yeah, and we could start small, right? Like, there's definitely a use case for get instance data, right? I don't know about even set instance data. Maybe you still want to clear it, but like some small set, and maybe it's just easier if we say, well, like, let's start with the smallest set.
Yep.
Okay. So what I'll do then, I'll just inside of our documentation, I'll add the section which talks about these pure finalizers effectively. And it just lists functions which are safe to call from pure finalizers.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay. But otherwise, like I said, it's PR in the relatively good state. It was perfectly with two major questions: what to do about pre-existing state and about list of different functions which we can call or not. But I do have tests covering these basics. Oh yeah, I think we discussed last time. I just don't remember outcome. If you look on the PR, I had to add checks for touching GC in many existing functions, because previously we had effectively check if we accessing JavaScript. But what I found that touching JavaScript, touching garbage collector state, it's much more widespread than accessing JavaScript. Like, for example, when we call create object, we're saying right now it's safe from the JavaScript access point of view, but it's definitely not safe from garbage collector point of view.
Yeah, I think that's running JavaScript.
If we're saying create object.
Yeah, if you're creating a JavaScript object, that's effectively running JavaScript.
Okay. So
Same
it
with
means
destroying an object, same with anything which is like effectively changing the state on the JavaScript side.
Okay.
Right. So like if you've created your own C structures, then I think that's okay. You know, you can delete your own C structures, but if you're trying to delete objects or free objects, all that stuff that's got to be run in a JavaScript context.
Yes, definitely. All these functions not safe from yes, accessing garbage collector state. I agree. But what I'm trying to also understand that currently our code has some situations we're not allowed to run JavaScript anymore. I think it's mostly about some kind of shutdown scenarios. Like
Right.
when shutdown state, we currently prohibit accessing some functions which can potentially run JavaScript. And for example, can we create new object while we're running this shutdown scenario?
I think the answer should be no.
Okay, because today we're allowed to.
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like if we're going to not let you like run a method, why is creating an object useful?
We have this method called can call into JavaScript.
Right.
My understanding that this method can call into JavaScript is only used currently during shutdown scenarios. But for some reason,
Right.
some of our Node API functions, they're not checking it. Some of them check, like if they never use an API preamble. With an API preamble, it's establishing kind of JavaScript exception context. It can intercept JavaScript exceptions, and it also checking for this if we can run JavaScript or not.
Right.
But we have a bunch of functions which we, for example, locate a new object, new array, or something new, but we don't do this check.
Yeah, I don't remember a context. I know we don't, like, that's what I was saying. I think we do check different things depending on the method. But I don't know why that would be okay.
So for what I'm currently doing, I'm kind of splitting up these two concepts. One of them, touching JavaScript during shutdown versus touching garbage collector state. It's
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. So maybe like that would be a good question, and maybe it would be, you know, Gabriel might remember some context as to like, hey, we said, yeah, you can create objects versus not, because my and I just may not be remembering, but like I would include creating objects, anything that creates a JavaScript object, right, would be in that same bucket of like, hey, I'm not allowed to run JavaScript because the JavaScript engine itself is not in a state where, you know, and it's not just the GC thing, it's also that, well, creating a JavaScript object is pretty much running JavaScript in my mind anyway. So
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay.
so yeah, maybe if you could like maybe ask that question. I don't know if you have it in the issue or something, and like mention Gabriel just to see if he's got any extra context on that one. Because I know he did a fair amount of work around the sort of, hey, we're shutting down side of things and finalization.
So let me write a comment to my PR and mention Gabriel and ask this very specific question.
Yeah.
Because, currently, I'm kind of splitting up these two consoles, but maybe we should not. That's from what you just said.
Yeah, it might be the flip side of we need more checks in some of the methods than we have as well.
Because I added a bunch of different checks regarding touching garbage collector state, and to the methods which are clear, so like they're missing it. Because I believe pretty much any call to V8 API, most V8 API should have this check.
Yeah, I would list if you can list that list of methods that don't force that, that would be good.
Okay. Well, pretty much they're visible right away, like on PR. Like if you look on this implementation, they never add this additional check for garbage collector. Check GC access. I think that, yes, I have this function. Check GC access.
Because I could see like maybe we were like we want you to be able to free stuff, but the allocating one just I can't think of a reason.
Okay. Yeah, I'll kind of add this comment. And yeah, cool. It's good discussion. Thank you.
Thanks.
Because I had all these questions asking, and kind of helps me to address them. But if you click on this JS native API v8cc,
this one, right?
If you scroll down a bit, you will see I have a bunch of methods where I add this additional check. Yeah, like you see all this over here, for example. Create array, right? If you see, like we didn't have anything before checking. We're just simply saying
create array.
I'm adding this.
That one doesn't. So let me just look.
Because we definitely, they never create a new array. We definitely try asking GC allocate new memory. But
right, definitely, yeah.
In GC finalizer state means like GC try to allocate some memory, didn't find enough memory. Now we're trying to clean up some code that we're asking. Oh, by the way, I want while I'm kind of cleaning up some code, allocate me memory more. Obviously, it will be
right. Yeah. Yeah, because so basically in our pure finalizer, we're setting can call into JS to false, right?
Right.
Yeah, my first would be like, really we should be. So JS values, so this create, so n blank.
So I have this check GC access, and this function effectively will do the crash. Okay, it will call like an API fatal.
Right. So with this method, JS value from V8 local value.
But it's too late. We must not call V8 array new, because effectively, if you call array new, actually this is what I
right. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's this right. It's this part that I was looking at this part and saying, well, this part's fine, but right, you're right. This right here.
Right. And in my test, as soon as I edit this create new object, an API create object, V8 was crashing there. Like it's not. I actually saw with my eyes that it will crash if we not crash. Explaining what happened, V8 will crash for us.
Is there a reason we don't use the NAPI preamble macro definition in some of these here? In these like create big int or whatever?
My understanding that NAPI preamble is quite rich in terms of it establishing exception handling context, which effectively relatively expensive. And then we're creating new arrays and objects. We do not expect any exceptions to happen.
I see. Okay.
I think we're
And
only
that-
using preamble if we expect exceptions.
That might be what's gotten us here is like, that was the reason, that was the differentiator, but then we added in later on this can call into JavaScript. And we didn't cover these other cases, which should be covered from that perspective. I'd be interested, like, if we add, yeah, so you're saying like, even if we wanted to add the, we wouldn't necessarily just use the preamble, we would want to use like a preamble light equivalent, or just, I guess, the check for the can call into JavaScript, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think, doing that, I mentioned to Gabriel to see if he remembers any different. The other thing that might be interesting is to run all of our unit tests with that check in there as well. Right, because like, the question would be, do any of our existing tests fall over if we don't allow that, these ones to run and when that's set?
I would expect the net was checking any kind of shutdown scenarios, and we can probably, and if we run finalizers in these shutdown scenarios, I guess if we call in any of these functions, they're supposed to crash. We can actually, I can verify it.
Yeah. Okay.
We definitely have some kind of scenarios at today.
Yeah. But no, that doesn't seem like. Okay, so yeah, sounds like we've got the answer. We are 15 minutes over, so I guess at this point I will say like, hey, do we have any other issues we should chat about before we close out?
No, good. Sorry,
Okay.
I didn't notice the time.
No, but that was very good discussion. So it's good to, it's interesting. Yeah, very interesting on that front, if like we've just missed those or not. So thanks for doing that. And we'll see everybody in GitHub next time then.